And the fundamental question of life is not, is it there? It's, will you get it out? We are all on the river, paddling to move ourselves forward. But if you align your boat with the current, it carries you. You go further and faster. It magnifies your efforts. Just stop for a moment quietly and agree with yourself. What is the one action I could take today that will move my life forward? And make sure you do it before you go to bed. Don't end up the 80-year-old on the sofa scrolling and double tapping, telling anyone who will listen how you had that idea for that company. You could have written that book. That's miserable, man.
Fresh insights into what it means to lead today. Whether you want more innovation more easily, you're feeling burnt out or overwhelmed, or you simply know that something isn't quite the way you know it can be, you are not alone. I hear the same from leaders every day. On Uncommon Leadership, we explore aligning personal fulfillment with business success, creating authentic teams, and cultivating the resilience, adaptability, and ease necessary to move beyond simply surviving today's challenges into thriving. I'm Michael Hunter with Uncommon Teams, and today we will uncover fresh insights into what it means to lead in this world today. Joining me is Steven Puri. Steven is one of the few people who has been a senior executive at 2 motion picture studios and also raised over $20 million of venture capital and run 3 startups, 1 successful exit and 2 failures. He brings lessons on healthy productivity, flow states, and remote work. Welcome, Steven.
Michael, I hope this is one of the more entertaining and engaging episodes, and maybe some actionable tips. Let us see where it goes.
I find I love every guest I have on.
Because you're a loving guy.
That may be part of it. When did you first recognize, Steven, that integrating your whole self and integrating that into everything that you do might be a valuable approach?
You know what? Pretty far along in my career. My career began, I'm the son of 2 engineers. Both my parents worked at IBM. My mom was a software engineer, coder. My dad was a hardware engineer. He was a chip designer. So when I was young, I learned to code because it was just, part of being in the family kind of. And then my first job was really, as a junior software engineer at IBM. And that led, I sort of fell backwards into film because film went digital and suddenly they needed people who could understand engineering and all that. And that led to my film career. And then I got back into engineering a couple of years ago. So through that weird kind of like cycle of like engineering to creative to engineering, really the answer to your question is it became more clear to me what was important to me only maybe in the past 5-6 years with founding this company and really wanting to give people a tool to do something with their lives because the world has just become so distracting and so chaotic and so noisy. How to give you something to do something with your life. That to me is really the closest alignment I've felt to who I am with what I'm doing. More so than working on Die Hard or the Wolverine,
So all that time where you weren't aligned, how did that feel then? And as you reflect back on it now, where you've found more alignment, what do you recognize now that you were experiencing then that you didn't realize then? Or you realized but didn't understand what it meant?
Yeah, here's the thing is I have to acknowledge I've been super lucky. Like in multiple careers, I've done things that I'm, proud of. Started my first company in my mid-20s. I had produced the digital effects for Independence Day. Became good friends with Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, the director, writer, producer. And the 3 of us started a company to do digital effects. Raised about $15 million for that, which was honestly not that hard given that we won the Academy Award for visual effects on Independence Day. So, right after you do that, raising money is not the most difficult thing in the world. Sold that company 4 years later. So in my late 20s, I was like, I've had an exit already. I had money in my pocket. probably a little too full of myself as one gets in their 20s thinking, you're smarter, better looking, funnier than you actually are. And then, getting through the film stuff, getting deeper into film production, film development. I'm grateful I've had those experiences to be on those sets, to work with those great writers, to have had that experience to play politics at those levels. It was exciting. Like being a senior executive on, some of those movies or being in any way associated with them, super fun. Wouldn't want to give it up. Wouldn't want to go back and say, oh, my true alignment when I'm 14 years old is to create a flow state app for people to do something great with their lives. I probably wouldn't have been really ready for that. The wood wouldn't have been seasoned yet. But now it's very much where I am, and I love being part of a community of people who are doing something, with their lives. So I don't know that it would have been great when I was in my 20s, but now it's great,
When you were at that point, did you feel like you were 100% on your path doing exactly what you wanted to do? Or did you have some dissatisfaction going on?
At different times, I felt very satisfied. Like, I remember building the first company. That was like, wow, to sort of go from zero to running a company with 82 people, I think, at our peak. Working on major films that people were seeing in theaters, like there was a lot of fulfillment. There was a lot of fun. And the thing that I think is sort of subtly different is thanks to a friend of mine who was like, he's an engineer. He was actually at Descript and at Groupon. He had given me the idea because he asked me to help him with an app he was creating. There was like a to-do list app, a very mindful to-do list app. And he's a great guy. So I helped him out with that for a while. And at a certain point, he had a child. He's like, I have to tap out. I got to go get a real engineering job and do that. And that inspired me to look at what I had learned, because one of the things along the way was working with some really high performers. You start to see what habits of them are sustainable, like which ones are going to be doing this in their 30s and 40s and 50s, and which ones are going to just burn out by 40 and be like, I got to move to a mountaintop and live in a cave, That was really interesting. That led me a lot to this understanding of flow states and, sustainable high productivity.
There's satisfaction and there's alignment. You were satisfied at that point in your life. Did you feel like you were aligned then?
At times, because it's like, when you are 25 and you're on film sets and you're, talking with writers and directors and producers about, making movies. Like, I love movies. Like the movies that really light me up are like the big summer fun movies that I remember from my childhood, and it's true. Like, I remember seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark the first time and Star Wars #4, The New Hope. And I remember seeing those and being like, this is amazing. And seeing like Batman in a theater and just be like, oh my God, wow. So there was an alignment between like what was satisfying and fun and, what I wanted to do at the time. Now, there was definitely a moment. Die Hard 5 was a real big marker in my life. That was like an inflection point because at the time I was at a studio, and studios are for-profit entities. And this is News Corp, which is, if you know anything about the Murdochs, you can understand what kind of culture that is. So there was a significant amount of pressure to make a Die Hard movie, and the script quality, the depth of the idea was not inspiring, let's say. And that was a big moment for me where I was like, ooh. And I understood my boss's point of view, which is like, listen, we put out a poster that has words Die Hard on it. My statistical monitor, my quants can kind of tell you how much it's going to make by Sunday night. Whether or not the film is good, whether or not there's film in the can, I can tell you how much it'll make by Sunday night. And then once people tweet about it and, talk to each other, that'll determine second weekend. But if you make it cheaply enough, by Sunday night, we're in the black, and then who cares? We're making money, right? And I was like, wow, I do not want to wake up, be like 40, 50 years old, be like, making Die Hard 19, because we can, not because we have an idea for it. And that's when I got back into engineering. And that's when I thought, okay, well, if I'm not going to do film, the only other skill I really have is engineering. Can I find problems that can be solved with engineering? And I had 2 companies in rapid succession. Both I raised around 3 million US for. And both of those failed. And they were painful lessons. The old adage about, you learn more from failure than from success. The post-mortem that I did on those, I was like, wow, I got to remember this stuff. I got to try not to make these mistakes again. That was incredibly formative for me. Even though at that point I was not 25 anymore, I was deep into my career. I was like, there's still stuff to learn. And you got to be, I don't know if humble's the right word, about, you have to be open to it.
Was it?
It's a long answer. Sorry, Michael.
I love long answers. They give me a lot to follow up on and understand. Were all of the scripts before then good? You just happened to look into a string of really good scripts and then Die Hard 5 didn't meet your standards? Or had something happened then that your perspective on the quality of a script shifted somehow?
Well, I will say this, to Steven and Stacy's credit, when I was at DreamWorks for 4 years, there was definitely a culture of, how could we make this better? And I'll tell you, there are a lot of bad films that get made, but it's not that people set out to make bad movies. It's just really hard to make a great one. Like lightning has to strike multiple times. Like the script comes together, it's just, and the casting and the schedule and the director and the music and the cut and the macro environment you're releasing it into has to be ready for. So maybe DreamWorks didn't always make the best movies on earth. It wasn't like it was like the white, Castle on the Hill or whatever, but definitely there's a culture of like, go home tonight, try and make Project 1% better. And I respected that very much. That's inspiring. And I worked on some stuff that, maybe was great. In whatever small way I contributed to it, I'm very proud. But, not everything turned out to be a huge box office hit. And I was there, I was at DreamWorks about 4 years. I was an executive vice president for Kurtzman Orsi at the studio. And that was the era of like Transformers 1 and 2, Star Trek 11, Eagle Eye, Fringe, stuff like that. So I'll tell you, when you ask me about, was it that I had changed or the material had changed or whatever, there was not that same ethos around Die Hard 5. And you could feel it in the script. As a matter of fact, I think the screenwriter that I inherited when I went to Fox, I think he was kicked out of the Writers Guild for plagiarism, I want to say. But it's just one of those projects where you're like, it's money. I mean, again, it's called show business, not show art. And this was show business. And there's a place. These are for-profit, publicly traded companies. There's a reason why it happens. So I'm not here to be, Pollyanna and complain about something. I have much more respect for Steve and Stacy and people like that who are just like, let's try to make something great and commercial, and keep our stock price up. Not let's just make everything cheaply and hope we don't lose money on bad stuff.
The experiences you had has shifted your perspective, and the environment around you that you were working within shifted. Mm-hmm. And it didn't shift in the same direction. And for whatever reason, at this point, you realize, you and I are too far apart now from where we want to be, so I'm going to go off and do something else.
Yeah, very much so. Like Fox was the end of my desire to be in film. And, there were a number of external factors that were applying pressure there. When I grew up, movies were a really, really big fraction of your entertainment, attention, and economy, right? by the time we're doing Die Hard 5, like social media was a huge distraction from going to see movies. You know, online gaming, social gaming, like, you know, the kids were all on their Xbox, you know, our bosses would complain sometimes, you know, because that was eating away from the time and money they'd spend on movies. So it was definitely a different, you could feel the film economy contracting. Fewer tickets were sold. So prices were going up to try to keep the box office up, you know, in tickets times average price. And that's kind of an odd thing when you're going, well, yeah, fewer people are going, but we'll try and get more money out of each one and see if we can balance it out. Yeah, so that sea change, I saw that from the inside, and you know, it's not great when you're part of a contracting business, you know, and God knows what happens now with generative, you know, AI. It's like, you know, a lot more options.
What led you to go off in a completely different direction rather than saying, well, I have all this experience in tech and I have all this experience in movies, telling stories. There's always things that are taking over from what movies used to do. How can I smash all this together in, like, invent the new next best thing that's going to take all the best parts of all of this and take the world by storm?
You know, the way film was evolving, the kind of stories were getting made, getting financed, didn't interest me. So it wasn't a question of like, oh, well, I know how to make digital film, I guess I'll go back to just making digital films. It was like the kind of movies that are being told, the stories that are being told. Like, you know, am I going to look at my kids and be like, hey, this is what I did through my 40s and 50s, whatever, to pay for your school? You know, like, I don't know.
And telling stories in a different way beyond film of whatever format didn't have a pull for you?
Like what medium? What specifically are you thinking about?
I don't know. If film is disappearing, you have all this experience in engineering, and engineering is what's inventing all the new things, that's taking all the attention, then a logical place to go next would be, well, I don't want to do film anymore. I still love telling stories and helping good stories get made. Let's find a way to use technology to make good stories being made be cheaper, faster, more effective, be told through all these new mediums that are showing up. What if we tell a movie through social media? What if we tell a movie through putting QR codes all over the place and you have to go and track them down to put together the story? Ideas like that. I don't know. I'm making things up out of my head.
Yeah, no, you're right. All those are valid ideas. And I mean, when you talk about like short form content, you know, snackable content, God, you know, Pop tried that. Katzenberg took another bite at the apple, I think, with his Quibi thing. You know, now there are some short form dramas on TikTok that are popular, but it is not my passion. My passion is not to try to make 7-minute installments of a 35 installment story or something. Like, the thing I really loved was, I love debating about, like, the original Die Hard. Why is it set at Christmas? Like, how does it fundamentally operate? Why is it the same movie as Taken? Taken is just Die Hard, almost beat for beat. You know, like, there are such interesting things for me in that kind of cinematic content, but not when it's reduced down to the level of like, hey man, you know what? We could do Avengers 19. Come up with some idea why we should, you know? And I have friends that work on that stuff, you know? It's like they're working on Ant-Man 7 scripts. It pays the bills. It pays the bills really nicely. But then you wake up, you know, 50, 60 years old being the guy making Ant-Man 7. Yee. You know?
Had your passion shifted then? And as you flipped and moved past movies into your 2 startups that didn't work and then into what you're doing now, had your passion shifted? How did it shift? How did you recognize as it was shifting?
Yeah, the thing that became very interesting for me is in watching like really high performers operate I've been fortunate to be around some like the top screenwriters, the top directors in the world, and see like how do they manage their brain and manage their productivity and their mental energy and their spirit and do stuff in a sustainable way. And that lights me up now, that sort of crossover between like the spiritual nature of doing something meaningful with your life and the neuroscience of like, hey, we exist in these mortal coils and how do you manipulate it to do that? That's very clearly like why flow states were fascinating to me when I first discovered, oh, that's what that phenomenon is. Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Let's learn more about that,
Was your earlier interest in movies a lower, I'll say, not as a judgment that it's less, but as a smaller scoped attempt to help people reach those flow states where they were enjoying themselves so much that they just hit in that space and then hopefully would continue after? Or is it completely
I don't think they were all related. No, it's all unrelated. Because I'll tell you this, the point in which I first experienced a flow state, or at least one that I recognized and now I remember, I didn't know the concept of flow state. I just experienced something where I was like, huh? And I'm in Austin here. I was going from Austin to San Francisco. And the next day I was going to show, I wanted to demo like an idea I had for a feature to the team and see if people are like, oh, this is really cool. Like, let's build this or poke holes in or something, but at least illustrate in a way that was impelling. So Alaska runs that nonstop on Austin SFO. Get on the plane. Captain's like, sorry, kids, Wi-Fi's out, see you at SFO. We take off. I start working. 15, 20 minutes later, we start to descend. And I think, oh, we're in Dallas. Like something's wrong with the aircraft. They're going to have us switch aircrafts. They're not going to tell us what's wrong until we're on the ground. Like, hey, the hydraulic system failed, So I was like, okay, so we're landing in Dallas, fine. And I looked down and over 2 hours and 40 minutes had gone by. And I had no concept of that. I didn't know if the drink cart had come by, the flight attendant with the drink cart. I hadn't spoken to the guy in the seat next to me, but my designs were done. And I liked them. I thought they were a good, hacky, but good illustration of this idea. And it was a really weird feeling because I don't know if you've done this, Michael, but I had prepared myself mentally for hop in the Uber, grab a sandwich in the hotel lobby, go up to the room, finish stuff, and pass out and go to the meeting in the morning, right? I hopped in the Uber and I called a buddy of mine. I was like, hey man, I have a free night in SF. Do you want to have dinner? Like, are you free? And that feeling of being ahead of my day was really nice. And then later in research and understanding, I came to understand about flow states. And I was like, oh, wow, that was a flow state where like the world fell away. I was able to do this great work in a compressed period of time. And at the end of it, I felt up instead of down, that caught my attention. That's super cool. And I would not have been in a position to think about this if it hadn't been for a buddy of mine who was like, hey, can you help me with this app I'm working on? I was like, sure.
These phase transition points in people's lives, in our careers, in our passions, fascinate me because so often they're exactly what you described of they come out of nowhere. We don't see them coming. Maybe after the fact, we can look back and see a thread going through things. We think, oh yeah, it was all the way there. But in the moment, we don't know it until it hits us. Or some point later, often, where we don't even realize we've shifted until some time later. And understanding what's going on in our experience as we're going through these shifts helps me help people identify them earlier, where we can then direct them, I'll say, more consciously and get to them more accurately. Not necessarily faster, it may actually take longer. But we can get there more precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And I can never get enough information about this out of people and how it's experiences for them.
Well, let's try today.
So how long have you been, since you recognized that first flow state to now, how long has that been?
God, like 5-ish years, 4 or 5 years. That was early in the pandemic. So that pandemic was what, 20 to 23-ish? So yeah, like 4 or 5 years. Man, time flies. The pandemic was that long ago, yet it was not that long ago.
Over that time, how has your interest, excitement, engagement with the idea of this flow state thing? This is pretty powerful. I guess this is what these top producers, screenwriters, filmmakers I've been blessed with working with are in a lot. How can I help myself and others get there? How is that
it's
changed?
Well, I'll say there's definitely the period of collecting data and the period of time in which I was exposed to a lot of high performers gave me the ability later to sift through those data and say like, oh, what are the patterns I saw? Because like definitely the flow state thing, thanks to my buddy, like that was one where it's like, oh wow, suddenly different things come into focus about how that works, you know? And what does it they say? You know, wisdom is wasted on the young, or, you know, youth is wasted on the young. But it was like that sense of, oh, there is a way to be super intentional with my attention. And in doing that, have a life where I get more done and I feel better as opposed to feeling burned out. And so I'll give you some examples because it's not just flow states. Flow states is definitely like the heart of it, but there's a whole self-awareness around this. So let me give you, because I want to move from the abstract into sort of concrete things, is let me give you a couple of very concrete examples. One thing, so I'm a young, you know, aspiring development executive. There at the time was a very successful screenwriter, Ron Bass, who wrote Rain Man and My Best Friend's Wedding, a bunch of stuff, right? And he was famous for not talking to his family in the morning. And as this was explained to me, he had spoken to them and said, listen, when I start talking to you, even if it's as mundane as, hey, who wants pancakes, who needs a ride to school, whatever. He said, as soon as I start doing that, I can't hear my characters' voices in my head. And that's what I get paid for. And paid well, like $1-2 million a script. So his family was like, super cool, Dad, you know, go bring home $2 million. We can make the pancakes. We got you, right? And he knew that in the afternoon, he could do collaborative stuff. That's when he could do like studio note meetings and collabs with other writers and all that stuff. And that idea of understanding one's chronotype, like the concept that at certain times of day, you're more adept at doing certain kinds of things, that became super illuminating to me, where I was like, oh, wow, this guy really spent the time to go, how do I work best? One aspect of that is when I work on what? And, you know, this guy is at the top of his game. Like to get Julia Roberts and Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman at the top of their careers to say yes to the words that you wrote for them. Like they have 30 other offers on their desk with offer checks stapled to the front, you know, metaphorically. They could choose anything, but they chose yours. So that really speaks to him saying like, this is how I optimize, you know, what I do. And I've seen that applied now by many people in different ways, including when I was in SF, more part of the SF, let's say the hustle culture. And for a while I bought into that thing of like, oh, if you want to be, you know, doing engineering development, you know, you're up late into the night. And, you know, this was an era when like microdosing psilocybin or LSD was like biohacking to create great code. And I bought into that for a while. And I realized that whenever I would do that late at night, maybe I'd stay up until 4 working. that stuff from midnight to 4 was the stuff that got done. But then later I would look back at it and be like, we got to sort of refactor that. We got to optimize that. Like it works, but it is not the best way to write this and to build a foundation, for future stuff to be written. So that's, again, just starting to understand how to apply chronotype to yourself. That's one concrete example. May I give you another example? Fair? So one thing I noticed was the way some people, especially people who created things, and by that I mean created code, created words, created designs, like created, right? I mean not biz dev or sales or marketing kind of people, right? One of the things I noticed was what I had met Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin. They were coming off Stargate and then went to do Independence Day, and then we did Godzilla together and some other stuff. So they had a house that they rented down in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, where they wrote. And they had to go down and write, and Roland told his assistant, Joey, Joey, go rent the villa for a month or two. We got to go do this. And she came back and she's like, it's already rented. It was like an Airbnb, before Airbnb. So she's like, somebody rented it already. What do you want to do? Roland called his entertainment attorney, John Deemer, a fantastic attorney. And was just like, John, buy the villa. By Monday, Roland owned a $5 million villa in the hills of Puerto Vallarta. This little kid from Virginia, had never seen anything like that. I was like, what just happened in front of me? Huh? And I talked to Dean. I was like, can you walk me through this? 'Cause my parents' home was worth a fraction of this vacation rental that Roland bought on a whim. And Dean said, there is a room there where in the morning the light comes in over the pool. And there's something about that room where we write in there and we never think about what are the studio notes we're going to get? What cast is available on what schedule? What's the budget going to be? He's right. We just write the movie we'd want to see. So it's worth it for us to have that. Now, I'll mention 6 weeks later, Roland and Dean came back with the script that became the third highest grossing movie in film history at the time. And it worked for them. That they knew that there was something about that place that got them in a mental space of, let's write something great and let's not be distracted with all this noise of like, well, Michael Hunter's not available in the spring, so we'll have to write the role for Steven Puri. None of that garbage. And it is not to say that you need a $5 million budget to go have a mental space, because years later, when I'm with Alex Kurtzman and Bob Orsi, who are, the writers of Transformers 1 and 2, Zorro, Mission Impossible 3, Star Trek 11. I mean, my God, like huge. I don't know how many billions of dollars of box office, right? When they got in the crunch time, hey, you got to deliver Transformers 2 in the next 2 weeks. We were on the little Amblin compound on the Universal Studios lot in Hollywood, right? Beautiful little area that Steven has there. They would have their assistant rent a room at the Universal Hilton across the street, which I'm just going to say, it's not a luxury villa in Puerto Vallarta, right? This is where you stay with your kids the night before you go on the rides, and then you get out. And I was like, they could go they're also making $1-2 million a script. They could rent a home anywhere. Why a hotel room across the street? And what hit me one day was they had met back in school. And I think for them, the experience of Kurtzman on the edge of the bed with his MacBook and Bob at the little desk on his MacBook and brainstorming what comes next, it evoked dorm room. It brought them back to, we are scrappy writers who must prove ourselves, and this is how we do it, and this is how we came up, and this is how we got on Alias and Hercules and Xena and those early shows where they proved themselves to later become, $1 million writers. And that is just another, if chronotype is one concrete idea where it's like, hey man, just measure for yourself what you feel best doing over a week or two, and you'll start to see your patterns. Another idea is simply place. Like, because many of us work remote, or we work in different areas, you can work from a coffee shop, your office, your home, your kitchen, your living room, it does become somewhat chaotic to your brain, as opposed to if you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to write my blog every day from this coffee shop or from my office at home, or I'm going to do my coding at this desk. When you come to that place, your brain starts to go like, oh, hey, I know why I'm here. It's almost like you train a dog and put the bowl out, and the dog is like, I know what happens next. This is going to be great, So those are some just concrete ideas around this general topic of flow states and how to manage your brain. I hope that's helpful. Is that crazy, or are we good?
No, this is great. So now you help your clients identify these things for themselves. How do you go about doing that?
This is the thing that this is the heart of it, which is, let me set the table, because I know some people listening are flow masters and they're super into flow states and all that and know everything more than I do. And there's some that maybe have a passing understanding of it because they've heard it's in the zeitgeist, like, what is this thing, right? So let me just describe it and then we'll all be on the same footing, which is, there was a Hungarian-American psychologist, this guy, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He had a thesis. He said, if you talk to high performers in various disciplines, scientists and authors and inventors and athletes and artists, it's interesting that when they talk about the highly concentrated states where they do the thing that makes them famous, they talk about that state in very similar ways, even though they're doing something very different. He was like, what's up with that? And so he did the research. At the end of it, he wrote a book called Flow. It's the seminal work on it. It's why we call it a flow state. And he said the greatest thing. I just love this. He said, I chose this word because it was the most beautiful metaphor for what I found. We are all on the river, paddling to move ourselves forward. But if you align your boat with the current, it carries you. You go further and faster. It magnifies your efforts. He's like, that's what these high performers have figured out how to do, and how to do it repeatably. That is the foundation of what really lights me up, because then, in the lucky place where we are today, we benefit not just from what he researched and what he wrote about, hey, how do jazz musicians get into, flow? But you also have so many smart people in the, standing on shoulders of giants kind of thing, where they've dug in and said, let me tell you a lot about deep work versus shallow work, Cal. Let me really help you understand like traction versus distraction, Kotler, like, how does music work? Does music help you get into this flow state? We benefit from all that. Like, that knowledge is out there. What I did to answer your question is really just work to put all of that in one place. So if you wanted to get into flow state, I was like, well, you could have one music app, and there's some great music apps. Endel's wonderful, Brain FM, like there's a ton of them. YouTube, Spotify, then a Pomodoro timer, then a task list thing that shows you some feedback, and then a distraction blocker. And there's like all these pieces. And I was like, I don't want that. In the morning, I just want to open a website, hit a big play button in the middle, and have it all done for me so I can get into my work. That is what we did. That's the part of it that's special. And it's solely because really smart, generous people did a ton of research so we could build on that.
So it's not so much that you help individuals identify their ways to get into flow. It's more that you and some other smarties got together and figured out a way to just suss this out on your own, what's going to work for people. How does that magic work?
Well, what I believe is this. I believe that there's a fraction of the audience that says they want to do something with their life that is going to. And if I can make it more available so that fraction gets larger, that's a really great use of my life. Now, I say it that way because when you look at like the market capitalization of these companies on the stock exchange, some of the highest market cap companies, their business model is simply steal your life. Like, that's it, full stop. And they have the money to pay the best engineers, the best designers, the best behavioral economists to do that. And they used to be all shy and aw shucks about it. You're like 10 years ago, when Zuckerberg would be called to Congress, he would do the whole like, oh, Senator, we're just here trying to show grandmothers video of their grandkids. That's what we do here. It's like so hypocritical and disingenuous. And now if you listen to any of the quarterly calls, any of the shareholder meetings, any of that, they have lost any pretense about that. They are straight up, listen, these are the techniques we deployed this quarter to try to steal as much of everyone's lives as we can. We call it shareholder value. And we have some new techniques for next quarter that'll goose the stock price more. So please buy more of our stock. And they're straight up. So whether it's Elon, Zuckerberg, Evan, whomever you want to, point the finger at, it's amazing when you consider it, to be reductive. It's like if Mark Zuckerberg called you up and said, Michael, I would like your life, and I'm going to sell it to these advertisers, and I'll keep the money, but I will give you some dancing cat videos. Is that cool? Is that a good deal? And there is a fraction of the audience that will fall victim to him, to those predatory ways of saying, I can continually optimize using behavioral economics, using casino game kind of like techniques, that kind of psychology to keep you here. And I think that's criminal. And I firmly believe that we all have something great inside us. It may be you have the next great American novel in you. I may have an amazing restaurant concept. Someone may have an app. Someone else may have a company. Someone else may have a nonprofit. But all of us have something great inside us. And the fundamental question of life is not, is it there? It's, will you get it out? And when you have trillion-dollar companies in that tug of war for your life, and the other side of that rope is you alone, you better have allies. And that's where we come in, is we wanted to say, here's a really inexpensive way to access flow states. We'll give you all the ingredients. Go do something great with your life. Do the thing you're capable of. Don't end up the 80-year-old on the sofa scrolling and double tapping, telling anyone who'll listen how you had that idea for that company. You could have written that book. That's miserable, man.
Completely agree. This is one of the reasons I'm so fascinated by people's inflection points in their career, in their passions, in what they choose to spend their life pursuing. Because whoever we are, the world is clamoring to have us in our lives. Some of us, I believe we all know this innately. Some of us have the, I don't know the right word, courage, gumph, wherewithal. Some of us manage to pursue that, to offer it in at least some small amount. Some of us manage to offer it in enormous amounts. And however much of that is left untapped, I am convinced is where all the grumpiness of the world comes from. I know I can do more than I am. I don't know how to do it, or there is something holding me back from doing it. I don't know what to do about that. And so all I know to do is be grumpy.
Yes. You want to be grumpy now? We could be grumpy for the rest of the podcast. What do you want to do it? Let's be grumpy.
I'd really rather not.
Your listeners are like, oh boy, another one of those.
And this is why I do the work that I do, is to help the leaders I work with to debug themselves so that they can understand what it is that they really want, what it is that is holding them back, and to shine out the former even more and dissolve all of the latter. And understanding for people like you, when you have gained some of that clarity, when you have removed some of that baggage and how you did that, where that has taken you and what you found after that, which is always another more clarity, another more baggage. The more I understand how everyone else is doing it, the more I can do this myself, and the more then I can go and help other people do it themselves. We have talked about all sorts of things today, Steven. What have I not asked you?
Let's see. It's funny when I am interviewed or do speaking engagements with guys over 30. Invariably, the question about whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie comes up. It's kind of hilarious. You've graciously sidestepped that one. A bunch of people ask me my favorite movie and why, and want to compare it to theirs. And every now and then, someone asks me, what's one, if there's one thing that their listenership could take away and remember, what is that one thing? So I'm ready. Any one of those three, or throw a curveball. We can wrap it up however you'd like.
I don't understand the contention around whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie or not. Probably for the same reason that I don't understand the contention around which football team or soccer team or kick the beating with your foot team is better.
Yep. I'm with you on the second one. On the Die Hard one, I understand why people ask. Yeah, go on.
With movies, I know that with everything, my tastes and preferences are super eclectic and happen to align with what the rest of the world seems to enjoy, only very fractionally.
What's your favorite movie? Don't be a tease. What's your favorite movie?
I don't have a favorite movie. I have a few movies that have always hit me all over for different reasons.
You're talking about Taylor Swift's Eras Tour.
No, I actually don't know if I ever heard a Taylor Swift song.
Wow, that's impressive living in this country. Well played.
Which is probably to say, I'm sure I've heard a Taylor Swift song that I didn't know it was her. Just like I don't know who most of the music. Three movies that I always go back to are Star Wars, and I love all of them, even Jar Jar Binks.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Intellectually, I understand why some people hate Jar Jar, and also I don't get it.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so Star Wars, gotcha. You said there are two more.
Yep. Love Actually.
That is such a touching movie. I can cry in that movie.
I always do. And Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Okay, Raiders is my favorite movie.
Nice.
Why is it yours?
I have always loved the insouciance with which Indiana Jones just takes on the world.
Yep.
The scene in, I don't think this is Raiders, where he's fighting the guy in the square and he gets fed up and just pulls out his gun and shoots him because he realizes this is not the way I want to spend my day. I don't know the right word, but that approach to life has always been what I aspire to. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm going to do the thing that is best for me to move forward.
Interesting. Possibly apocryphal, don't know. The scene you're talking about in Raiders, that was somewhat improvised because Harrison had dysentery and just wanted how do we cut this scene shorter? And it, as you know, is quoted so often as being like this fantastic scene that's all about character and stuff. So who knows? Good story or truth, not sure. I will tell you as succinctly as I can, because I know we're out of time, what I love about Raiders, which is having worked on the development of a lot of action movies and having seen even more. There is a truth about action movies, which is, the hero in the third act is going to save the world by doing some physical feat or something they know how to do. And you set it up in the first act where it's like, oh, they need to be a great archer. Well, in the first act, we're going to show him at the archery range with his best friend as they have a conversation about the girl. Oh, he needs to be an amazing sharpshooter. We'll open the movie where he's in Afghanistan shooting something 3 miles away blindfolded. You know what I mean? Like, it's just how these things are set up. And there is not another action movie that I can name, and I have seen a lot, where in the third act, in the climax of the movie, the hero is incapacitated. He can't lift a finger. And I have not known anyone who has seen the movie and complains about that. And the reason for it is that character writing is so good. I think it was Kasdan was involved, and Philip Kaufman, and there were a few people who contributed to the story. I don't know who contributed this part of it, but even though the hero does nothing, he does nothing to save Marion. He can't jump and kick and shoot and do the arrow and shoot the gun or doing it. Is, if you remember in the beginning of the movie, they set up when the opening plays, and he's clearly kind of a Tomb Raider. You're trying to figure out, like, he's stealing archaeological stuff for good or evil, not clear, to sort of, stealing golden idols of gods or whatever. And the government guys come to his school and, like, what's this arc? He's like, oh, it's this, if you believe the whole God thing with the commandments and the tablets, and it's this thing and whatever, hokey pokey, hocus pocus, right? Skeptical about God. He's got to meet Marion because she's a piece of this. She's like, you never loved me, you used me, you were my dad's partner, you threw me aside, you never cared about me, right? So you got these emotional things going on. And do you remember in the climax of the movie, what is the one thing he does? Marion, close your eyes. And with those words, he goes, yeah, I believe in God. He's real. He's coming. It's going to be bad. And I love you. I'm going to save you. And he pays off both those emotional storylines with those few words. It's brilliant.
What would you like to leave our audience with today, Steven?
Simple thought. I work now to give people the ability to do the great thing they're capable of. And I know you can't do everything at once. So I will share with you the one thing that I encourage everyone to do, which is when you wake up in the morning, think about what is the single action you'll take that day that will move your life forward. Don't think of 3, don't think of 10, don't think of all the things you could do in the world, but simply say, before I open my phone and go through my emails and return the thing and make the breakfast and drive to work, just stop for a moment quietly and agree with yourself, what is the one action I could take today that will move my life forward? And make sure you do it before you go to bed.
Love it. Thank you for being with us today, Steven.
This is awesome. Thank you for having me. Thank you for a very thoughtful podcast that you create.
You're welcome. Thank you for that.
And thank you for listening. Whoever's here, thank you for listening.
It's just where I was going next. Thank you for joining us today, audience. And Steve and I would love to know, what is your one thing today? Thanks,
yes,
and have a great day.